final TPC webinar. It's another great session we're bringing back from the TPC conference in March, seat upgrades and how airlines inspired a new theatre model. I'm joined today by Ryan Metcalf from Preview. So I'll hand over to Ryan shortly to introduce himself and today's topic. If you haven't used a Zoom webinar before, please pop your questions in the Q&A box down at the bottom. I'll dig through those at the end. Anytime you want to put a question in, you can ask it anonymously if you want to remain anonymous. But put your questions in there and we'll get through those at the end. So I'm going to hand over to introduce himself over to Ryan.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Let me share my screen and we'll kick off. Super. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining this rerun of the presentation from TPC early this year. To those who were at TPC and a half last year, this is sort of a part two. Chris Crossley of Lineup gave a fantastic presentation on upsells, during which he gave an exclusive preview of Seat Upgrade, which was in development at the time. There's been a lot of talk recently, and there's a lot of talk at TPC in Manchester about the airline industry, about things like reselling legislation, and how airlines don't allow the transfer of tickets and how that relates to our world. Things like dynamic pricing, how dynamic pricing is such a common practice within the airline industry, but it's such a sort of hot topic within theatre. But nobody is talking about the other side to airline ticketing, which is loyalty and points and upgrades. I truly believe that the airline industry is 20 years ahead of theatre when it comes to ticketing. We're going to dive into that a little bit and a little bit more about Seat Upgrade, which we launched earlier this year with LW Tickets. So anybody who knows me knows that I'm chronically on an airline. In 2023, when the journey of Seat Upgrade started, I changed the time on my watch 85 times. 2 of those were for daylight savings. 83 times was because I swapped the time zone. Preview's work is across London, New York, and LA, so that's sort of roughly how I split my time, or at least it was in 2023. And one thing that I did on nearly every single one of those trips, as well as pick up a Toblerone for an incredibly understanding better half from Heathrow, was upgrade my seat and post a photo of it to my Instagram. But to sort of get into upgrades, we need to take a bit of a detour from theatre and take a closer look at airlines, their pricing models, their loyalty schemes, how they've perfected monetizing unsold inventory, and how they've nailed generating different revenue brackets for fundamentally the same service of transporting somebody from A to B. Loyalty is so integral to the bottom line of airlines. It's now at the point that legacy carriers, your Uniteds, your BAs, your Deltas, they're better described as financial institutions that happen to transport people as a moderately successful and profitable side hustle. There's sort of not even much money in transportation anymore. These are banks, they're credit cards, they are airline miles, and then they transport people for a bit of fun on the side. The loyalty schemes of some of the largest airlines are astronomical. For American Airlines, Delta, and United, the loyalty schemes generated anywhere from $6.5 to $8.5 billion in revenue in 2023. You've also got miles that are issued that are never redeemed, and that contribute to profitability. And airlines also sell miles to partners at a significant markup. The cost internally for them of creating a mile is typically less than 0.5%, and it's generally sold at a markup of sort of 300 to 500%. I fly Delta and Virgin 99% of the time, but if it's not a route that they fly, I'll still sign up with whichever frequent flyer scheme I'm traveling with on that particular occasion, which means I have loads of random pockets of airline miles. That sits on the balance sheet of these companies and accounts or contributes to their profitability. Things got a little bit weird over COVID for many reasons, but one of them was actually how they all started using these balances of airline miles as collateral. And it really drove home just how valuable loyalty was to these airlines, literally as a number on a balance sheet, not sort of marketing speak, but literally the value from it. United obtained a $5 billion loan from major banks by leveraging their mileage program, and AA was about to, I don't think it did in the end, but it was about to put forward their mileage as collateral against a government loan. A lot of these airlines don't actually own stuff or much stuff. A lot of the sort of aircraft themselves are leased. So a huge part of their balance sheet is air miles. And there was also a really weird moment where, amongst other weird things that happened during that time, Delta's Sky Miles balance, or the customer's balance, was valued at more than the market cap of the airline itself. So if everybody wanted to at that point go and head to the airline and knock on the door and transfer out those miles to Hilton or another transfer partner, you effectively have the airline equivalent of a bank run. But why do people actually care about frequent flyer schemes? The main one tends to be upgrades, which is what we're talking about today. So there's a few different kinds of upgrade that you can actually get on an airline. You can get a complimentary upgrade. This doesn't really happen anymore. And there's two main reasons why this doesn't happen. Airlines want to maintain the value of its its premium offerings, the sort of prestige associated with it. Frankly, you don't want to piss off the person who spent $5,000 on a business class ticket by putting somebody into the one next to them for nothing. This doesn't just happen in airlines either. This happens across the hotel industry. The Savoy Hotel, for example, sits at an occupancy rate of around 50%. Its rooms start at £800 a night, and anybody who's sort of studied business would say that, respond to market forces, you drop the room rate and you increase the occupancy. But they don't care. They would fundamentally rather sit at an occupancy rate of 50% for £800 a night than increase their occupancy by decreasing the room rate. And actually, there are sort of benefits to that. They maintain the prestige, the premium, but also there were lower overheads because, the housekeeping bill is less. So that's one of the main reasons why that's not there. The other one is that there's now low availability. In 2011, Delta sold 14% of its first class inventory. In 2024, it sold 88%. People just hate each other now. Like we just are happy to pay for first class. People are happy to pay for a little divider between you and the person next to you in a way that the general public sort of wasn't previously. So pretty much the only way that you can get a complimentary upgrade nowadays is if it's the 1980s, but that ship has sailed. You're George Clooney and your assistant accidentally booked you into economy, or there's been an aircraft change for operational reasons. Now, this is the most magical moment of your life if you ever receive this, when you sort of scan in your boarding card and somebody says, oh, and hands you a new one, and you actually turn left when you get on the plane and you were booked to go and sit in economy. It's magical, better than the birth of your firstborn. It's amazing. And this happens in theater as well, but we don't really talk about it, or we don't really call it an upgrade. Um, there's actually, I have a memory from about 12, 13 years ago, and my family and I, we went to go and see Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at Drury Lane. And we booked sort of balcony seats just on a whim, and they were £18.50. And when we got there, and there was somebody at the door to Drury Lane, and they handed us a sort of new ticket and said, oh, there's sort of not a problem, but there's sort of we're going to need to give you this new ticket. And your mind immediately goes to, oh crap, like what's the problem? Is the performance cancelled? Is there an issue? Have I bought a dodgy ticket? But what they were doing was they'd closed the balcony because it wasn't sold particularly well, and they'd move people further forward, and we were in the front row of the dress circle for our show, and it was incredible. But at no point did anybody say, you've been upgraded. It's just a customer service thing, it's a marketing thing. But instead of saying, oh, for operational reasons, hell, like, hire somebody to stand there with a trumpet when you come in the door and tell people they've received an upgrade. It's just customer service, it's just marketing on it. The other way that people get an airline upgrade is paying with points or with vouchers. People save up their points and redeem them for upgrades or hotels or cruises or whatnot. You also get credit card vouchers if you're with a certain credit card, or if you renew your frequent flyer scheme. Most people end up getting a +1 voucher. The final way of getting an airline upgrade, and the main thing we're talking about here today, is a cash upgrade or bidding for upgrades. So this is the sort of rough typical pricing of a round trip from London to New York. If you were to book it like 3-4 weeks out, not around Christmas time, not peak holiday, real super ballpark pricing. What I do every time is that I book premium, and then I put in a bid for business class. And this is what the interface looks like on Virgin Atlantic. To get to this screen, there are 12 clicks involved, including logging in twice. And you've got to actively know that this exists. Then you've got to navigate it to it on the website, and you've got to sort of go through all this process. Virgin don't email people about it. From a customer service experience, it's terrible. And yet it still does billions in revenue for the airline industry as a whole. So I do my 12 clicks, I log in twice, and I put in my bid for £400. And about 90% of the time, that will produce an upgrade to business class for, in this case, about a £3,600 discount. Eat your heart out, Martin Lewis. There is a new kid on the block. Come to me for more seriously out of touch money saving tips. But from Virgin's perspective, there's basically no additional OPEX in me sitting in that seat. It'll be staffed exactly the same. I personally don't drink when I fly, so I'm not going to be spending 8 hours getting through top shelf booze. I've already pre-ordered my meal, so that'll be, that's on the plane regardless. But I'm still made to feel like I've won one over on Virgin Atlantic. Like I've got one over on this massive corporation that I should have spent £5,000 with, and I haven't. It's one of those true rare business scenarios of a genuine, authentic win-win. Um, there's some additional operational costs in terms of sort of air passenger duty that is owed, certainly flying out of the UK. But other than that, every part of that bid is pretty much pure profit. And this is partly sort of a messaging thing as well. They could very easily just send across an invoice or a receipt for the payment. And it's basically like, ha ha, sucker, thanks for the extra money. We'd have got you to New York regardless, but enjoy your extra leg room. But it's not. The messaging is all celebratory. It's, congratulations, it's good news, it's, look at you, you've got one over on us, and they nail the messaging on it. Plusgrade is the largest provider of this within the travel market. They partner with over 250 hotel chains and airlines, and they facilitated, in 2023 at least, over $5 billion in revenue. This is a huge area. There are other providers as well. Nor1 by Oracle provides upgrades for Hilton. They also provided the upgrades for the Midland Hotel, which is where we stayed at for TPC in Manchester earlier this year, which, just to illustrate the point, when I was at Manchester, I booked the presidential suite, or I booked the normal room rate suite that was available, the double room for TPC, and I signed up to their rewards program, and I put in a bid for the presidential suite and won it. I couldn't particularly tell you why I require 1,000 square feet to fall asleep at night in a hotel. It's probably one for a psychologist, but it illustrated the point pretty well. And this is absolutely everywhere. I recently took a train up to Connecticut from Penn, and both my Amtrak train and hotel emailed me to offer me an upgrade. And I actually think both of these emails are terrible. Neither show me the three critical factors of an upgrade. What do I have now? What are you offering me? And how much does it cost? Both of these omit those three fundamental basic pieces of information required on an upgrade. With Amtrak, with the train, clicking the Learn More button took me to a page where I could enter a bid, but then it didn't elaborate on what first class even included. It said that the service varied based on train type. So to actually find that out, you'd have to Google to find the train number. Once you had the train number, you'd have to Google to find the train stock that is used on that route. And then once you had that, you'd have to Google to try and find what first class included on that. It's a terrible user experience. Generally, if you want customers to spend money with you, you want to make it as easy as possible. You don't want to force them to do homework, because who is going to bother doing all of that? I mean, I did, but that's sort of beside the point. All of this to say that this is prolific in pretty much every single industry apart from theatre, or it was until earlier this year when we launched Seat Upgrade. Seat Upgrade is a white label product by Preview, which integrates seamlessly with ticketing systems to allow self-service upgrades in exactly the same way that you may be familiar with if you've ever done it for an airline or for a hotel. And this is what it looks like. About 70% of traffic comes from mobile, so the whole site is designed to work on mobile, but we do have a desktop layout as well, which is on the left of your screen right now. It shows you very simply, what have you got currently, what are we offering you, and how much does it cost, in an intuitive way that people can actually just work through it themselves and upgrade their own seats. And this is what it looks like in action. So when you land on the website, you land on seatupgrade.com. You have, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about this later, but you have a view from seat of your current seat and the seat that you're looking at, or the various options that you're looking at moving into, and the ability to click a big book upgrade button, which completes that upgrade all by yourself. You can look through all of the various different options available and ultimately decide whether you do or don't want to put in an upgrade. Once you've decided that you want that upgrade, there's a little message that reminds you that the seats that you're moving out of will be immediately placed back for sale. So you can't ring up and say, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Can I have those old seats back because they may have been bought? And it kicks you off seatupgrade.com and takes you direct to, in this case, LW Theatres to complete payment, at which point the booking is complete. So what's actually happening when people land on seatupgrade.com? There's a unique reference within the URL which is decrypted. So unlike some of the upgrade systems where you need to put in your reference number and then it finds your booking and then it goes through, it immediately lands you on the page that is related to your booking. We take that reference and we run an API call to retrieve your existing booking details. We then run another API call to find the live availability of the performance that you have booked. There's an API call to preview to find out how we rank all of the seats in that auditorium. There's then an algorithm which finds and sorts the seats that fulfill your original booking criteria, i.e. if you have 3 seats currently booked, it will only find groups of 3 that are available. If you've currently booked a seat on an aisle, it will try and respect that a little bit with the algorithm, but not to the sort of total detriment of how we rank the seats in the auditorium. It'll then rank the viable options by value. We'll touch on what we call value in a little bit. And it displays that information on the website. And it will do all of that from the link loading to the page populating in just under half a second. But people land on the website via an email typically. And this is the email that we get. And where Amtrak and Hilton fail, I think Preview and LW succeed, because in this email, you get those 3 pieces of information. What do I have now? What are you offering me? And how much does it cost? And then a link directly to the unique seat upgrade page. There's 2 pieces of technology that actually make seat upgrade work. The website itself is what it is. It's a white label website to sort of display these options. But there's 2 pieces of technology that under the hood are making this work. There's Preview's view from seat product, Seat Preview, and our proprietary sightline analysis software. Seat Preview you may have seen. Certainly if you've booked a ticket in the West End or on Broadway recently, you've probably seen Seat Preview, which is our CGI 360 views from every single seat in an auditorium. We're the only provider that goes and 3D laser scans venues, and we produce 360 views from every single seat in an auditorium. So it's not representative of a view from a section. We have sort of 10 images that represent what the view is. It is actually per individual seat, and it's accurate to a couple of mil because we go and scan it ourselves. For those of you who aren't familiar with sort of 3D scanning, we have this little visualization video that shows exactly what's going on. So this is CG that you're looking at the moment, and this is fundamentally what's happening with a LiDAR scanner. The device that you're looking at there sort of looks a bit like a camera, but it isn't. If you've ever used a sort of handheld laser measure to measure your kitchen, it's doing that, but millions of times a second. So all of these tiny little measurements you can see on the screen right now are actually sort of data points in 3D space, measurements in 3D space that the scanner is capturing. And that gives our in-house team a sort of millimeter accurate copy of the venue to work from. So there's sort of no ambiguity in it. It's exactly a representation of that venue. Preview as a company works on sort of theater productions themselves. So we need the data to be as accurate as possible, because if we're advising on sightlines or if we're sending this file across to a lighting designer or a set designer, they can't work with ballpark. They need to work with millimeter accurate. Hopefully this is the sort of end result of this is fairly indistinguishable from a photograph. If you've not really clocked that what you're looking at online is a CG render when you booked a ticket for something like Moulin Rouge or Cabaret, it means that we've probably done our job pretty well. View from seat is so critical to seat upgrade because it fulfills 2 of those 3 criteria. What have I got now, and what are you offering me? It can't be a view from a section. It has to be each individual seat. If you had a view from sort of 15 images representing a 1500 seat auditorium, it's simply not possible to accurately show what the upgrade to a specific seat would be. If you didn't have view from seat, the website would look like this. Your current seat is upper circle K14, your new seat is stalls Q23. Please give us your £55. Seat labels mean nothing to the vast majority of people. This would not successfully convert. Without view from seat, you're basically just saying, trust us on this. The other piece of technology that's critical to seat upgrade is sightline analysis. And for that, I'm going to hand over, hopefully with sound, to the voiceover artist that we paid a couple of years ago and are still trying to get good value for money from. Oh, and there's the joke from the presentation.
The first step in the process is to build a preview digital twin. These digital twins can either be made from on-site LiDAR laser scan surveys or using as-built plans, 3D models, or BIM files. If the venue is built, we recommend an on-site laser scan survey. The more accurate the source data, the more accurate the output data from sightline analysis will be. Once we have our digital twin, we populate the venue with digital avatars. These avatars are representative of the height and build of an average person. The next step, and the first step in our sightline analysis software, is optimization. In this step, the avatars in each seat move within a customizable range of movement to find the best potential sightline from each position. This process simulates what a person would naturally do if they sat in the seat and found the view not immediately ideal. They would naturally lean a little forward or perhaps move to one side. Once the optimal position for each seat's avatar is discovered from the thousands of simulated options, we're ready to run the main data capture. This process measures the exact percentage of an area or a number of areas that is visible from each seat, taking into account any architectural obstructions and the heads of others. We can also incorporate additional factors, such as the distance to the defined areas and a 20/20 vision parameter, which analyzes how visible the areas are to somebody with 20/20 vision. The resulting data is mapped to a heat map representing the seating design, allowing stakeholders to visibly see any sightline issues. We can also run additional data analysis on the raw data which is generated for each seat. At preview, we can advise on potential changes to the seating to increase the sightline percentage of individual seats in the venue or the venue's score overall. The resulting data can also be used to make informed decisions regarding pricing of tickets to events. With sightline analysis, we can quickly rerun the simulation on a new design, allowing for rapid iterations of plans. Our technology is used across a number of sectors, from live events to media and entertainment and education. Please get in touch with Preview for further information.
The shorter version of that is that we measure how good a seat is, and that enables us to work or bring that data into seat upgrades. So when we're actually presenting those options, we can confidently say that that's the best within that price band. We think that this gives us the industry's most sort of data-driven best value or best available algorithm. It's not simply to do with proximity to the center of the auditorium. It's actually totally sort of objectively and analytically derived. So we call value the ratio between our sightline analysis output and the cost. We did a fair bit of research and testing on this before we went live earlier this year. Share some of that information now with some of those focus groups and surveys. When presented with upgrade options that the customer deemed as representing value for money, respondents to a survey overwhelmingly indicated that they'd be open to paying for an upgrade. So we're sort of off to a good start here. We also tested how many upgrade options customers should be shown. And this is something that we're still actually A/B testing. If you book a ticket for an LW show now and you do receive a seat upgrade link, you'll see that at the bottom you get 3 options immediately, but you can click to expand it. You know, we don't want to have choice paralysis on these things. You don't want to get totally overwhelmed by showing, 10 plus options. If you're in the worst seat in the house, there may genuinely be 10 price bands above where you're currently sat. And that's a bit overwhelming for people. So we initially select a few that show a representative spread. And then you can sort of click and look a bit further into it if you wish. And that's pretty much the data that we got as well. So that's what we ran with, but we are continuing to A/B test it. Another key piece of sort of data intelligence that we're still trying to refine is when's that sweet spot of offering an upgrade. The psychology of seat upgrade works because the credit card statement is paid off. You know, if somebody 6 months back booked their ticket for Matilda or Back to the Future or whatever it may be, they've forgotten about that. and then the upgrade is simply just £20. We never give everybody the, we never give them the net. We never say it's £20, but by the way, as a quick, neat reminder, you already spent £75, £80 on this. It's just £20. Sort of the longer the gap between that, the better, pretty much. I think there'd be fairly limited success in offering it immediately, either as an email sent or sort of an email sent after booking or during the initial purchase flow itself. Some systems already have this in place and they prompt customers in the basket whether they want to upgrade. I can totally understand the value in this, potentially if you have a view from seat. If you don't, I can't really see much value in it, because sort of telling somebody that they're currently in, Circle F12 and offering them stalls G3 doesn't mean anything to the majority of people. And generally speaking, if they were interested in paying at that price band, they probably would have done originally. And the real magic of sort of seat upgrade is that there is that gap between it. And that's pretty much the data that we got as well. Days before performance, and the sort of longer that gap out from the original booking, the more willing people would to spend more. We also looked at the method of upgrade. There are three key different methods of upgrading on seatupgrade.com. There's the cash difference, which is the straight difference between the cost of booking, so the cost of your current seat versus your new seat. There's the discounted difference, pretty much the same model as sort of hotel upgrade systems. You offer a percentage discount on the rate card cash difference. This one is sort of a little sneaky magical one in that you're still ultimately offering discounted tickets, but instead of throwing them to TKTS or to Datix or wherever it may be handling your discounted third-party tickets, you're discounting internally, but you're not discounting to new customers, you're discounting to current customers. And the double whammy of that being that you're moving those existing customers out of a seat that is probably more likely to sell at full price face value anyway. If you've got unsold premium inventory and you've got very well sold £50 inventory, you can move somebody from those £50 seats into the £100 seats via seat upgrade, potentially at a discount, get their £25, £30 off them, and then you're selling the £50 seat that they've moved out of at full price. Understandably, people are more receptive to receiving a discount. No sort of rocket science going on here. And the final method is a bid for an upgrade, exactly like Airlines. This is launching soon, and this is for over a certain threshold. Instead of just paying a sort of cash difference or a discounted difference, you'll be able to put in a bid for an upgrade. Exactly the same mechanic as you see on sort of hotels and cruises and trains and airlines, where you can go in, you can place a bid, and if you win, you find out on the day. It's one of those sort of true win-wins. We want customers to have a sort of, oh, what the hell mentality around it, and just stick 20 quid in or 30 quid. If they win, happy days. If they don't, who cares? Similarly, the producer has managed to get 20, £30 for an otherwise empty seat. So how do we deal with allocating bids? It is a little bit more complicated than with an airline or with a hotel. With each of them, it's sort of relatively straightforward. You move somebody from one category to the next. With a theatre auditorium, though, there's a sort of fundamental difference that makes this considerably more complicated. We actually, when we started developing this, and we found that, you do that initial round of winning bids, they then move out of seats. But people who previously placed a bid that may not have won on round one would now win because people have moved out of the seats that they bid on. So you actually end up needing to iterate this several times during the course of a day to optimize an auditorium. You may end up with an auditorium that looks completely different between sort of 10 a.m. when we start running bid algorithms versus 10 minutes before curtain, because we've maximized revenue by shifting people around and moving people forward in the auditorium. And for one sort of final travel anecdote and photo from my Instagram, this is the winning bids algorithm. And this is a true story of sort of last October, and I was sat in the lounge on an A330 on Virgin Atlantic with a Diet Coke and a mountain of naive optimism about how straightforward it was going to be to write this algorithm. I sat there and I programmed it. The initial logic did rely on multiple nested if statements to evaluate all the potential seating arrangements for a sample theatre and sample bookings. I think I used the Adelphi Theatre, 1,500 seats, and I think I generated 300 sample bookings, totally random. And I clicked go, and I clicked calculate, and this was what popped out as the number of potential different ways to see people in an auditorium. It's about 1.3 billion. It's a big number, but it's not sort of outside the realm of, you know, computer algorithms. That's generally okay. You can rank that, you can sort that, and that's fine. And then I scrolled along the screen, and that was actually the number. Potentially it was the altitude, but my brain had forgotten about factorials. That number there, 1.293 times 10 to the power of 279. As a point of reference, the estimated number of atoms in the universe is 10 to the power of 80. It's ridiculous the amount of ways that you can seat people in an auditorium. So sort of went back to the drawing board a little bit on it. And Seed Upgrade's winning bid algorithm actually now uses IOP to select the optimal combination of upgrades that maximizes revenue, whilst ensuring that no seat is sold twice and that all operational rules are followed. Integer linear programming is essentially like sort of writing a set of rules and letting an algorithm figure it out. Essentially say we have a limited number of available upgrade seats, lots of different bids from customers, and it helps us pick the combination of winning bids that brings in the most money, whilst making sure we don't sort of break any of our rules. But what it doesn't necessarily do is simply just respect the bookings that people have put in, or the bids that people have put in. So to give you a scenario, the goal is maximize revenue whilst respecting specific seats on which customers place a bid as closely as possible. But so if Jamie, for example, placed a £30 bid for band B seat stalls B11 and B12, and Jamie is currently in band D and paid £40 a ticket, Henry places a £20 bid for band A seat stalls G8 and G9. Jamie is currently in, Henry's currently in band B and paid £80 per ticket. When the bid algorithm is invoked, band B is fully sold out at this point, and the only two seats left in band A are stalls G8 and G9. In this scenario, Henry would not receive an upgrade, even though those specific seats that he's placed a bid on are available. The algorithm, whilst maximizing for revenue, would upgrade Jamie to the next band, prioritizing the £30 in revenue over Henry's 20. This whole system is designed to maximize revenue, not necessarily respect who's actually put in a specific bid on seats. The sort of what's next for us, AI-driven dynamically priced upgrades, assessing market conditions, how well other shows are selling at the time, historic sales data, weather forecasts, is the World Cup on, all sorts of fun to intelligently dynamically price upgrades, fully hands-off, fully automated, all with the sort of goal of trying to get a full auditorium at the most revenue. Customized targeted offers. Some customers may receive different levels of discount or upgrade options based on booking history, potentially loyalty. Touched on it at the start about how loyalty is so important to airlines, and I think we're going to see more and more of that now. Interestingly, in between doing this presentation and, well, now, ATG has launched their priority entry lane into theaters, which again is just totally a sort of rip off from the airline industry. But I think we've got a few more things we can rip off as well. Loyalty standards, an integration of F&B and hospitality, a totally unified platform for upgrading the entire trip to a theater, not just the seat that you're going to be in, but the next slide being adding your F&B and buying a program already. And that's all. There's a QR code on there if you want to download a copy of this without as many Martin Lewis photoshops and quips in. It's a sort of slightly smaller, slimmed down version of this deck. But I think that leaves us with a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you very much, Ryan. That was superb. If you do want to, we've already got questions piling in, which I'll get to in a second. If you do want to ask a question of Ryan, or you've got a point to make, head down to that Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will get through those. They are coming in quickly. It is the last one of this season of webinars, and I do like to say I get to ask the first question, or I get to prioritize my questions, because I'm sat on this with you, Ryan, but I will get to the ones we've got coming in now. The big question I guess I have is LW huge, and obviously I can understand that kind of that financial juggernaut of an organization, but how do you see this do you see this as a real opportunity for more regional or smaller theatres, as well as kind of those large West End venues? Well, where do you see the kind of cutoff point of people who could get value from this?
Yeah, I don't see it being particularly limited. Obviously, the scale and revenue opportunity is going to it's going to be proportional to the amount of tickets you're selling on a weekly basis, daily basis. But I mean, frankly, the business model on it anyways, that we're on commission and upgrade, so there's sort of nothing to lose for a smaller venue. If they're selling a full house, 8 times a week or 6 times a week in a touring venue, then happy days, doesn't cost them anything in addition. But it still feels like a premium experience. People are used to getting nagged from Hilton and from Virgin and whatnot, and actually I think people seeing it at a small regional venue, to me at least, would seem a bit more premium than the usual sort of, potentially you ring them up and say, oh, I booked one seat, but can I move to another one? So I think there's still value to be found there. Of course, when you're a major West End operator, there's sort of more revenue to be done.
Okay, great. Right, I'm going to start piling through these now. If you do have a question for Ryan, please do get it in the Q&A box at the bottom. Question 1 from Anonymous here. What ticketing systems is this integrated with?
Yeah, it's currently integrated with Lineup, and Spectrix and Tessitura on the immediate roadmap.
And that was a quick and easy one. Look at that. We're going to fire through some of these. Next one. Sorry, I've got to pull up my screen. How is the income from the bids set up and reconciled? What functionality is needed in a ticketing system to be able to track it?
Yeah, so I can speak for sort of how we're integrated with Lineup at the moment. It's going to vary slightly depending on other systems. With sort of the bid system functionality that we're getting up and running at the moment, it's going to run through as essentially a dynamically discounted basket. So we're gonna basically spin up a unique discount code, voucher code that you're never going to see because it's only going to be under the hood, and then that goes in the reporting as sort of bids. So you can consolidate that afterwards and do the reporting on it, because it's as a separate bucket of I said bucket, aircraft terms, but it's a separate it's a separate revenue stream essentially.
Okay. So basically, it's spinning up this kind of discount code and applying it, so at least we can track it. Because again, I remember with some pricing tools from some years ago, one of the or even some ticketing systems, the challenge was when it was dynamically pricing, it was just changing the price paid, and there was no way to kind of reconcile why that price was paid as it was.
It doesn't change the price of the ticket itself. The ticket price remains what it is at the time. It's just your basket, and you've got like an hour to complete the checkout of that basket.
So I guess then you can report on how much money was, quote, lost. In your Virgin example of you paying, in theory they lost £3,600 because they sold that business class ticket as an upgrade. So, okay. I've got another question actually, which is kind of we touched on when we were getting ready for this webinar just before 3 o'clock, which was, how does this interact with dynamic pricing? So we've gone on sale and we've been changing prices. How does the upgrade sit with dynamic pricing?
Yeah, the data that we're pulling is the live pricing inventory. So if dynamic pricing is kicked in and either increased or decreased those prices, the upgrade is going to be still in relation to what that current price is. So seat upgrade is never sort of caching that information. It is genuinely, every time you hit refresh, hitting those sort of several API calls that's pulling that information live, that pricing information live. So if dynamic pricing, totally independently separate to our system is in place, it's just going to pull that information instead. It sort of doesn't conflict with it. It just runs alongside.
Okay, I need to dive back into this growing list of questions. They're firing in now, so do get them in. I think you kind of touched on this one. Came in, I think, just before the end of the presentation, but it would be good to go back to it. What do you think about other airline influenced offerings from theatre groups, like checking in for tickets and priority entry?
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer, a lot of those things. The airline industry has absolutely nailed selling us stuff that really costs them next to nothing to do. Or if they're not selling it, they're sort of throwing it in as loyalty. Priority boardings, things like get lounge access as sort of associated OpEx and things. But what can they give us that actually ultimately doesn't really cost them anything? And priority boarding is a good one on that. And they've nailed that whole mentality. So I think theatre's sort of got a lot that it can borrow from that world. I know ATG got a lot of press sort of in the last few weeks by launching priority boarding. I get that that's how things work in the theatre industry, but also I think ultimately let the market decide. Like, let people, if people are going to pay for it, if people are going to pay for priority boarding, then offer it as a product and say, let market forces drive. If everybody puts their middle finger up and nobody books your priority boarding lane, then it was a failure of a product. But as far as I'm aware, plenty of people are. But it's one of those other things that, you can sell it as a £10 add-on, or you can bundle it with your loyalty scheme. It doesn't cost you anything in addition to put a little rope line down the middle and send one person one way and one person another. So, I don't personally see issue with sort of bringing some of those added extras, as I guess, from the airline industry across. I don't think we'll be charging for baggage anytime soon. I think if you bring your handbag in the theatre, you'll be all right.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that I did a talk TBC 2018, I think it was, called "Let's Be More Like Airlines," and I touched on many of the things we've talked about today. And I can see, hello Hattie, you're on from NIMAX Theatres. I had a conversation with Hattie post COVID, because one of the things that we did in that airline talk was talking about checking in, and actually, coming out of checking in with groups and COVID tests. I think the most successful schemes, like the one that NIMAX run, were based on mirroring the process that people already were aware of when you check in and put your passport on. So, I think that I've been a big fan of copying or taking cherry picking some ideas from the airline industry, which would be really good. This is a great question coming in now, because it touches on from Anonymous about how brandable the experience is, and asking, could we theme it differently per show? Because again, I like the Virgin one. I shared one. I'm flying Icelandair tonight. It's a horrible upgrade experience. Bidding, it looks terrible. Virgin one's beautiful. So can you answer that? Talk a bit about brandability of the upgrade experience.
Yeah, it's totally white label. So it at the moment exactly mirrors LW tickets or LW theaters. So you'll see that if sort of some of the screenshots that you were looking at on that presentation, if it looks familiar, it's because the branding is entirely aligned with LW theaters. So it's totally white label. The only thing that's sort of not on brand is the URL saying seatupgrade.com. The rest, for all intents and purposes, could be your website.
Okay. I'm going back to Q&A now. If you have got a question for Ryan, please do get it in, because I think we may run out of time. So jump in now. Another anonymous one. Are there concerns that this is going to make people feel more excluded from theatre, more costs and pressure to spend money? So again, interesting one about inclusion or exclusion. And also, do you show this to everyone? Because you said on Virgin it was just do you have to book premium in order to bid for a business?
No, anybody can find it. They don't do much proactive outreach on it, but anybody can find it. And I think it's super interesting, this sort of as a question and as a point. And I'm so concerned and internally at Preview, we're so conscious of ensuring that Seat Upgrade as a product doesn't get lumped in with dynamic pricing, and certainly the government consultations on dynamic pricing, because if anything, this is sort of quite literally the opposite. This is giving people something for cheaper than what it should be. But we do have to be careful around the psychology of it. You don't want to ever be telling anybody, do you want to upgrade because, by the way, the seat you originally picked was sort of rubbish, because we don't want to be saying that. We want to be saying, here's a secret, sneaky way that, we'll put our hands up and say, look, we might not have sold too well, but would you be interested in sort of moving further forward? And some box offices do this anyway. Like, if you book yourself a ticket to Les Mis and rock up 5 minutes before and sort of smile nicely at them and say, oh, well, can I give you a tenner and can you move us forward a little bit? They generally will if it's a quiet performance. So this is just sort of moving that process from being a, one that you have to flirt with a box office attendant to get to something that people can do when they're sort of just sat on their phone in a cafe because they've landed into town.
Okay, that's fantastic. Question here from Rosanna. If we're using something like CrowdEngage, people who don't know, CrowdEngage is a system that sends your kind of reminds you of your tickets by a text and send you a link to your tickets. So if we're using something like CrowdEngage to provide convenience for tickets and optimizing pre-orders, can this replace that, or would it need to be used in conjunction, bearing in mind the customer journey? So again, I think the point Rosanna's asking here is I've got tickets tonight to the theatre. I've ordered my gin and tonic because I'm in the upper circle. I've now bid for an upgrade, and I'm now obviously in the stalls. I don't know if you've given any thought to this. How do you see that process working, or is that something that, depending on what tools people are using, you have to consider that journey?
Yeah, we'd have to consider it, I think. I mean, it would either sit alongside or would sort of take on everything that you're currently using CrowdEngage to do. I mean, the entire tech stack of Seat Upgrade is there to be able to remind somebody the current seat that they've got. Ideally, we're trying to move them into another one, obviously with the integration of F&B. But chances are we'd probably sit in conjunction of something like CrowdEngage. There's a few other system providers as well where you'd integrate a seat upgrade module within their flow. One thing we don't want to do is, sort of badger folks with various different emails beforehand or text beforehand and make it complicated and annoying. So chances are the sort of most straightforward way of integrating it would be that Seat Upgrade would be a module linked within CrowdEngage's initial outreach.
Ryan, that's superb. I think we've exhausted the questions there, and we've come in 2 minutes over the 45. So well done on that. We're on time arrival, as we like to say in the airline industry. Thank you very much indeed for this webinar. We'll make this available on demand if you are watching, so you can go back and scan that code if you did miss to download the deck. Once again, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, Ryan, and wherever you are in the world, have a great rest of your day, folks.
Thanks, everyone.